Adebayo Kuntoro stood in front of his expansive mirror, adjusting his silk tie. As the director of Zenith Ventures, a prestigious tech firm in Lagos, he commanded respect and wielded enormous influence. To his subordinates, he was a god. To his family, a loving husband and doting father. But behind closed doors, Adebayo's power was a weapon he wielded mercilessly. That morning, as he glanced over the city's skyline from his penthouse, his phone buzzed with notifications. He smirked as he scrolled through the names of employees scheduled for the quarterly review. It was another opportunity for him to test the boundaries of his authority, especially over his female staff. Among them was one name that caught his attention: Ifesinachi Tabori. Ifesinachi, or Ife as her colleagues called her, was known for her brilliance and grace under pressure. She had been with Zenith Ventures for 2 years and had risen through the ranks on merit. But her success had painted a target on her back. Adebayo had made advances before, subtle at first, a lingering gaze, unnecessary compliments, but Ife rebuffed him every time. This had only stoked his obsession. Ife's refusal was a challenge, and Adebayo was not a man who took kindly to defiance. As he stepped into the conference room that day, he decided it was time to escalate his game. During the review meeting, Adebayo barely looked at the other employees. His eyes lingered on Ife as he praised her work. When the session ended, he motioned for her to stay behind. "Ife," he began, his voice dripping with feigned concern, "you're one of our best assets. But there are expectations at this level." He leaned in closer, his tone shifting. "I can make or break careers here. You understand that, don't you?" Ife's jaw tightened. She understood perfectly. Without a word, she gathered her belongings and left the room, leaving Adebayo fuming. Over the next few weeks, Adebayo intensified his efforts. He called Ife into his office under the guise of work discussions, only to steer the conversations toward personal matters. He hinted at promotions, perks, and opportunities that could be hers if she complied. Ife confided in her close friend, Amara, who urged her to report him. But Ife knew the odds were stacked against her. Adebayo was untouchable, and any accusation would likely end her career. Still, she resolved to hold her ground. One evening, as Ife worked late to meet a deadline, Adebayo cornered her in the hallway. This time, his advances were no longer subtle. Ife slapped him and stormed out of the building, her heart pounding. She knew her days at Zenith Ventures were numbered. But Adebayo was not a man to take humiliation lightly. The next day, he summoned Ife to his office, his face a mask of calm fury. "Consider this your last chance," he warned. Ife's silence was deafening. Adebayo's obsession reached a boiling point. One evening, he waited for Ife in the parking lot. Under the pretense of discussing her performance, he forced her into his car and drove to a secluded location. Despite her protests, he overpowered her. The following morning, Ife tendered her resignation. She left without saying goodbye to anyone, her absence a whisper in the corridors of Zenith Ventures. Weeks turned into months. Adebayo dismissed Ife's departure as inconsequential. He was invincible after all. But a gnawing unease settled in his chest. He found himself thinking about her more than he cared to admit. His wife, Adebayo, noticed his restlessness, but attributed it to work stress. Little did she know, her husband's world was about to crumble. 3 months after Ife's resignation, Adebayo woke up drenched in sweat. His body ached, and his appetite vanished. He brushed it off as exhaustion, but the symptoms persisted. One evening, he fainted during a meeting. His colleagues rushed him to the hospital, where doctors ran a series of tests. As Adebayo waited for the results, dread began to creep into his heart. The nurse entered the room with a clipboard, her expression neutral. "Mr. Kuntoro," she began, "the results are in. You've tested positive for HIV." The words hit him like a thunderbolt. Adebayo's mind raced. He thought of his wife, his children, and the countless women he had exploited. Panic set in as he demanded a retest, but the nurse's sympathy confirmed the truth. Adebayo spiraled into denial, avoiding his family and colleagues. He spent hours on the internet, searching for alternative explanations. But the reality was unavoidable. His once charismatic demeanor crumbled, replaced by paranoia and despair. Adebayo noticed the change, but couldn't get through to him. Adebayo's isolation deepened as he grappled with the consequences of his actions. In his darkest moments, Adebayo's thoughts returned to Ife. He remembered her defiance, her refusal to bow to his power. He began to suspect she had orchestrated this, a final act of vengeance. The idea consumed him, driving him to track her down. Adebayo located Ife in a small town outside Lagos, working for a non-profit organization. He confronted her at her office, his face a mask of desperation. "Did you do this to me?" he demanded. Ife's calm demeanor unnerved him. "You did this to yourself," she replied. "Power doesn't protect you from consequences." Adebayo returned to Lagos, haunted by Ife's words. His health deteriorated, and rumors began to circulate about his condition. His empire, once built on fear and intimidation, started to crumble. News of Adebayo's illness spread through Zenith Ventures like wildfire. Employees whispered about the once-invincible director, now visibly frail and withdrawn. His condition became public knowledge when he missed critical meetings, leading to speculation about his fitness to lead. The board of directors demanded answers, but Adebayo deflected, hoping to maintain his crumbling facade. Adebayo, still unaware of the full extent of her husband's secret life, begged him to open up. "What's happening, Adebayo?" she asked one evening, her voice trembling. "You've changed, and it's tearing this family apart." But Adebayo pushed her away, consumed by fear and shame. One fateful morning, Adebayo stumbled upon medical documents in Adebayo's study. Her hands trembled as she read the diagnosis: HIV positive. Confusion turned to horror as she pieced together the implications. She confronted Adebayo that evening, demanding an explanation. Tears streamed down her face as he confessed everything: his abuse of power, the assault on Ife, and the reckless decisions that led to his infection. Adebayo's devastation was immeasurable. "How could you?" she whispered. "You betrayed our family, our vows, and yourself." At work, the board grew impatient. Adebayo's declining health and erratic behavior jeopardized Zenith Ventures' reputation. They issued an ultimatum: step down voluntarily or face public scrutiny. Reluctantly, Adebayo resigned, marking the end of his once-celebrated career. The announcement sent shockwaves through the company. Employees who had suffered under his reign felt a bittersweet sense of justice. For the first time, Adebayo felt powerless, a taste of the helplessness he had inflicted on others. Adebayo, though heartbroken, refused to let her children suffer for their father's sins. She took charge of the household, shielding them from the scandal. But her relationship with Adebayo remained strained. She considered leaving him, but struggled with the vows she had taken. For better or worse, she whispered to herself, though the words felt hollow. Meanwhile, Ife thrived in her new role at the non-profit organization. She dedicated her work to empowering young women, drawing strength from her ordeal. Though she bore emotional scars, she refused to let Adebayo's actions define her. One day, she received a call from Amara, who shared news of Adebayo's downfall. Ife's first reaction was anger, followed by a deep sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost was high. She resolved to focus on healing, leaving the past behind. Adebayo's health worsened, and guilt consumed him. Nightmares of his victims haunted him, particularly Ife. Her face became a constant presence in his mind, a reminder of the pain he caused. Desperate for redemption, he reached out to a local pastor, seeking guidance. The pastor listened patiently as Adebayo confessed to sins. "Redemption requires action, not just words," the pastor said. "You must confront those you've wronged and seek forgiveness." Unable to face Ife directly, Adebayo wrote her a heartfelt letter. In it, he admitted to his crimes and expressed his regret. "I don't expect your forgiveness," he wrote, "but I needed to acknowledge the pain I caused you. I am deeply sorry." He mailed the letter, unsure if she would ever read it. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of peace. Months later, Ife received Adebayo's letter. She read it with a mix of anger and pity. His words did little to erase the trauma, but she appreciated his acknowledgement of his wrongdoing. Though she couldn't forgive him, she chose not to let bitterness consume her. She burned the letter, watching the ashes scatter in the wind. "You no longer have power over me," she said softly. Abayo's patience wore thin as Adebayo's condition deteriorated. She struggled with the decision to stay or leave. Her children, sensing the tension, grew distant. Adebayo, once the pillar of the family, now seemed like a shadow of his former self. One evening, Abayo made her decision. "I will take care of you," she told him, "but only for the sake of our children. Our marriage is over." Determined to make amends, Adebayo reached out to other women he had wronged. Some refused to meet him, while others listened with guarded hearts. Each apology chipped away at the weight on his soul, though he knew he could never fully undo the damage. Confined to his home, Adebayo spent his days reflecting on his life. He donated his remaining wealth to organizations supporting women's rights and HIV awareness. Though his gestures felt inadequate, they were his way of honoring the lives he had harmed. His children, though confused by the changes in their father, began to see glimpses of the man he once was. Adebayo's humility became his redemption, even as his body weakened. In his final days, Adebayo wrote a memoir detailing his rise and fall. He titled it The Price of Power, a cautionary tale for future leaders. "Power is a gift," he wrote, "but when abused, it becomes a curse." Surrounded by his family, Adebayo passed away peacefully. His death left a legacy of lessons learned too late, but it also sparked a movement within Zenith Ventures to foster accountability and respect. Ife, upon hearing of his death, felt a bittersweet closure. Though she could never forget the pain he caused, she found solace in knowing justice had been served. She continued her work, inspiring others to rise above adversity. And so, the story of Adebayo Kuntoro ended, a reminder that power, when wielded without integrity, will always demand a reckoning. Moral lesson: power is a privilege, not a weapon. When wielded with integrity, it uplifts and inspires. When abused, it destroys not only others, but also the one who wields it. True strength lies in respect, accountability, and the courage to make amends for past wrongs. This story teaches that no position of authority justifies exploitation or abuse. Actions have consequences, and justice, though sometimes delayed, is inevitable. Redemption is possible, but it requires humility, sincere remorse, and a commitment to righting wrongs. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed our story. Please like, share, and subscribe. Bye for now.